Welcome. In this video, we'll be reviewing a curated list of books, the praised, the criticized, and everything in between. Let's see what readers really think, and help you decide what's worth reading.
Now we turn to Atalanta. Yun's comment, which received 329 likes, offers an interesting perspective. In theory, I love Greek mythology. Who isn't drawn towards stories of bravery and tragedy, all wrapped up in strong characters and epic battles? But in reality, I'm starting to flag a bit with the recent ones I've read, and I'm trying to put my finger on exactly why. Going in, I didn't know anything about Atalanta, and was surprised to learn that she was a part of the Argonauts on their quest for the Golden Fleece. It's always interesting to experience a well-known tale through the eyes of a different character, and Atalanta offers an undoubtedly compelling perspective, especially being the only female in the group. But the quest for the Golden Fleece is just a part of Dialv, though arguably its most exciting part. It's propended by her being left in the forest as a baby, and growing up into the huntress that she is, and postpended by what feels like a long wrap-up in which she figures out what to do with her life. And these two bookends just didn't quite capture my attention the same way, especially the former. To be honest, even the quest for the Golden Fleece somehow wasn't as epic as I thought it would be. At one point in the story, Atalanta even mentions that it feels like she was just a spectator on the sidelines, watching Medea help Jason take the Golden Fleece by witchcraft, rather than through a fair fight. And maybe herein lies the problem. By and large, the women of Greek mythology have always felt a bit like supporting characters, there to bolster the men's stories. So to take one woman, especially when it's a lesser-known one without a lot of content, and make a whole book's worth out of her may be stretching it. No matter how great of a writer Jennifer Saint is, she is still at the mercy of the source material, and can only embellish so much. Don't get me wrong, I found Atalanta's story to be interesting, but it was so mild compared to the grand vision I had in my head of what a heroine in Greek mythology should be. I wanted more for Atalanta, more adventures and more epicness. But, as it stands, her story probably would have worked better for me as a novella, or even as a series of vignettes, rather than as a full-length book. Still, I'm a sucker for feminist retellings, and since Jennifer Saint has positioned her books as exactly that for the unsung heroines of Greek mythology, I'll continue to read whatever she writes, even if I end up wanting more than what I'm given. Tilde 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 tilde.
Time for VenCo. Let's see why Kelsey's comment, with 163 likes, stood out. Have you ever wanted to read a book reminiscent of the Golden Girls, but it's a witchy scavenger hunt around the country for magical spoons? If yes, because clearly the answer is yes, get this book immediately. Dimaline has me ready to go hex the patriarchy.
Now let's move on to Clytemnestra. Let's see what Sujoya, the overbooked bibliophile whose comment received 319 likes, had to say. 4.5 star. Daughter of King Tyndareus of Sparta and his queen Lada, the sister of Helen, and ultimately the murderous queen of Mycenae who killed her husband Agamemnon, Clytemnestra has always been a lesser-known character in comparison to her sister, and what we do know of her is in the context of her scheming, and ultimately successfully executing her plan to murder her husband, after he returns home after the victory at the Battle of Troy. In her debut novel, Costanza, Casati explores this character in depth. The narrative follows Clytemnestra from her early life as a princess of Sparta, her relationship with her siblings, her subsequent marriage to her first husband, and the tragic events that lead to her marriage to Agamemnon, and her life as his wife and mother to his children, and the events that follow. The author allows us to understand the vilified queen, and her motivations, her convictions, and how the people and significant events in her life shaped her into evolving into the fierce and vengeful character she is known to be. Clytemnestra is a complex character. Raised with the training of a warrior, yet having to live her life according to the whims and wishes of her tyrannical father and brutish husband, she endures and perseveres, and waits for the right moment to assert herself. She endures much abuse, loss, and grief, including the senseless murder of her first husband and infant son. But when her daughter is sacrificed in the name of war, Clytemnestra's rage knows no bounds, and she knows what she has to do. The author does a magnificent job of crafting a solid narrative around this central figure. In the course of the story we meet several prominent characters from the Greek myths, such as Helen of Troy and Odysseus among others. Most of these characters are explored/alluded to in the context of their interaction/connection to Clytemnestra's story, and at no point does the narrative lose focus. Clytemnestra's anguish, her pain and her need for vengeance are palpable. The pace does falter slightly in the middle of the narrative while chronicling the years Clytemnestra waits for the Battle of Troy to end while she rules over Mycenae with a firm hand, but not so much that you lose interest in the story. I particularly liked how the author chose to end the novel, keeping it open-ended yet entirely satisfying. The author provides family trees at the beginning of the novel, and a glossary of terms at the end, both of which are helpful resources. Peeping is a powerful debut. Well structured and written in elegant prose with a fluid narrative, this novel is a joy to read. With strong feminist overtones, this story is both brutal and compelling. Though the author does not resort to any form of exaggerated sentimentality, it is impossible to remain unaffected by Clytemnestra's story. I would not hesitate to recommend this novel to fans of Greek mythology and feminist retellings/reimaginings. I look forward to reading more from this talented new author. I paired my reading with the excellent audio narration by Dimaline, which truly enhanced my experience. Please note that there are multiple instances of violence against women.
Let's move forward with Witch King. John Mauro's review attracted 410 likes. Here's what she wrote. My complete review of is published at is the new standalone dark fantasy from acclaimed author Martha Wells. Marks her much-anticipated return to fantasy after completing her books of the Raksura series. Kai, the eponymous Witch King, is a powerful demon, with a necromancy-type magic enabling him to occupy the bodies of deceased mortals. As the novel opens, Kai slowly regains consciousness to find that his mortal body has been murdered, and his spirit is imprisoned in some sort of water cage. Alternates between two timelines. In the present day, Kai tries to piece together the puzzle of who betrayed him. The present-day timeline is interspersed with chapters from the past, showing a more powerful Kai imposing his will on the world. Clues from the past timeline help to inform the reader about the present-day narrative. Kai is a fascinating character who exhibits a wry sense of humor, making fun to read in places, such as in the following exchange. The Kayadiwa Barasi. Despite these humorous moments, most of Harm is a dry read that fails to establish much meaningful connection to the world or characters. Although Kai exhibits sparks of charisma, the other characters mostly fall flat. Kamiyamayama. Martha Wells's writing is solid but, Nike suffers from slow pacing and a dense disengaging style that makes the book a struggle to read. As a result, I never felt fully invested in the story or characters. Was sparse. There are hints of great world-building in Adventure, but unfortunately, it is never fully developed in a satisfying way. Martha Wells drops the reader into the world at the beginning of the story, but her approach generates more questions than answers. Overall, the world-building feels surprisingly shallow, and proves to be an unnecessarily challenging read where the payoff is not commensurate with the effort involved. Despite its intriguing premise and flashes of sardonic humor, fails to deliver a story with enough depth or emotional connection for me to care as a reader. Grimdark readers may want to skip this one, and read some of the author's back catalog instead.
Now we turn to Victory City. Yukawayu Watanabe's comment, which received 263 likes, offers an interesting perspective. I really wanted to love this novel, especially because what Rushdie went through recently. But I have to be honest with myself, I do not love this novel. Quantuave. This novel made me quite angry from time to time. I'm sure that Rushdie believes he wrote a feminist novel. But he really doesn't understand women. If a goddess chooses a woman to create a new world, she would make her a ruler. Instead, Rushdie made Pampa Campana a wife of a stupid man who became the king of the new world just because. Then, he made her do it again. I know it's based on the real history of the Vijayanagara Empire, but Rushdie could tell a much better story if he understood women. What made me really angry was what Pampa Campana did as a queen. If any woman I know had a power and position to change a society like Pampa Campana, sexual freedom, openly having a lover outside of marriage, and displaying sexual artworks in the public, would not be a priority at all. So many male authors do that when they write strong female characters, and I detest it. That's their fantasy, and not our dream. If a wise woman created a world, she would be a ruler, and she would take a hold of the political power first, and keep doing it every second of her life. She would give the same educations to her daughters and sons. She would think about the best action every single day, which Pumper Compana totally failed to do. Having a couple of women in some positions which are considered to be male occupations doesn't mean women have equal rights. Pumper Campana could see the future, and she could whisper to people, but she never used that power to make rulers or her sons wiser. She used the magical power after nothing really mattered anymore. Even if a female ruler was wise, she would encounter so many oppositions, and often fail in the end. Rushdie didn't need to make Pumper Campana so stupid, unwise, to give her ordeals. Did I expect too much? I don't know. I reread some parts before I wrote this, and I am still quite angry.
Let's take a look at Hellbent, Chai, the library on TikTok. Heart's comment, which got 2,673 likes, might give us a clue why it stood out. This series has become akin for me to a relationship that I know isn't working anymore, but which I cannot quit, because every now and then something will happen, and for one brief blissful moment, I will forget all my reasons not to stay. I think my profound dissatisfaction with this series stems generally from my sense of its inadequate execution. At bottom, it all boils down to this. You've got this exciting premise, and all these riveting characters caught up in a web of complicated relationships, and carrying enough emotional baggage to fill an entire stadium. And yet, well, as readers, we never get to spend enough time with them, and they never get a moment to just. They are always running off after some new mystery, or some new unexpected plot turn, and we are always chasing after them, hoping they would just stop and sit and Barma. To me, that's when the most powerfully rewarding moments of the story occur, in the quiet interludes in which the characters are at last allowed to speak to us, to speak to each other, to be vulnerable, and to feel the depth of horror of what they experienced. I simultaneously hungered for these moments, so few and far between, and dreaded when the characters would inevitably be yanked back by the leash of a restless, hectic plot that was far less interesting than the mostly human puzzles on the page. This is, ultimately, the novel's major flaw, that the pursuit of plot tramps the pursuit of everything else, including characterization and thematic exploration, and that this in turn tends to pull the electricity out of the more emotionally charged moments of the story. I wish that the book had dived more into its thematic deep ends in order to allow space for the story to grow more organically opaque. Diana, the deep-rooted corruption at the heart of academia, the nature of magic and hell and the price of desire, all the minutiae of surviving in a world that wants us to disappear, and how the painful intimate traumas that we've carried for so long turn us into distorted images of ourselves. I wish too that the book lingered more on some of the exciting reveals that the series had been crescendoing into. I wanted to live in those moments more. Instead, it's almost like the story is determined to be painfully anticlimactic, rendering what should be singularly defining moments in the narrative unsatisfyingly hollow by virtue of quickly glossing over them. For example, and moreover. In other words, it is clear that Bardugo is an author with an abundance of ideas, but she tends to go for big splashy plot gestures, and fails to reckon with the interiority of her characters, or attend to the more minute particularities of the story. As a result, I couldn't help stepping out of the story, itching over that absence, all that unrealized thematic and emotional potential. With that said, will I be reading the next book because I need Alix and Darlington to Bararaston, perhaps become endgame? Well.
Here comes the will of the many. And guess what? Petrick's hot take scored 1842 likes. Let's read it. James Islington instantly became one of my favorite authors with. Since then, I knew I would need to read every new book written by him. And that's why, together with, by Pierce Brown and the 4 secret novels by Brandon Sanderson, reached the top of my most anticipated releases of this year. It's not a good habit to have high expectations toward any book as that makes us prone to disappointment. But I couldn't resist it here. I didn't know what the story in would be, and I still entered it with very high expectations because I loved how satisfying Islington completed the complexity of, and luckily, Islington managed to exceed my unreasonably high expectations with the first book in the series. As far as the first book of a series goes, this one tops over. in every possible way, and I think many of you know how much I enjoyed. By now, to be more precise, is Islington's best novel so far in his career. It is, at the very least, even though it is a different kind of book, up there with the quality produced in. This is a contender for the best book of 2023. By the end of this year, the competition is fierce, but I will be shocked if did not, at least, end up in my top 5 books of the year. And I will tell you why in this review. The Catalan Republic, the hierarchy, may rule the world now, but they do not know everything. He tells them his name is Vis Telemus. He tells them he was orphaned after a tragic accident 3 years ago. And good fortune alone gives him a chance to enter their most prestigious school, the Catalan Academy. He tells them that once he graduates, he will gladly join the rest of civilized society in allowing his strength, drive, and focus, what they call will, to be leached away and added to the power of those above him. As millions already do, as all must eventually do. Vis tells them that he belongs. And they believe him. But the truth is that Vis has been sent to enter the Catalan Academy to find answers, to solve a murder, to search for an ancient weapon, to uncover secrets that may tear the Republic apart, and that he will never, ever cede his will to the empire that executed his family. To survive, though, Vis will have to rise through the Academy's ranks. He will have to smile, make friends, pretend to be one of them and win. If he fails, then those who want to control him, who know his real name, will no longer have any use for him. And if the hierarchy ever finds out who Vis truly is, they will kill him. This is the blurb for. If you're familiar with Pierce Brown's sci-fi series, you might notice the similarities in the premise. For context, in Darrow is a red, the lowest rank in the hierarchy of labor within the color-coded society of the series. The gold is the ruler of humanity, and they have done irrevocable actions to Darrow in the red for many years. So Darrow has to masquerade as a gold and increase his fame and prestige through the rank of gold. To fulfill his revenge is one of my favorite series of all time. And yes, the similarities with can definitely be spotted in. Even more so because Vis has a personality that is quick to anger like Darrow. And the world building of these two series is heavily Roman inspired as well. More on this later. But more importantly, the premise and the Roman inspired world building are where the similarities end. Is a different kind of book compared to. This is not like the controversial case that, by R. Verdi has with, by Patrick Rothfuss. This 240,000 words long novel never felt derivative to me. It's the other way around. With more pages read in, especially after the insane ending, the more I feel, as a whole package, as expected of Islington, is another incredibly distinct, ambitious, and mind-blowing work of art. From my assessment, it would be more exact to say if you love the premise and world building portrayed in. It's very possible you will end up loving, especially if you love the magical school or academy setting and trope too. If you've read, you will know that plotting is one of the finest aspects of the trilogy. I'm pleased to mention Islington's strength as a mostly planner storyteller. I believe every writer is a mix of both. Returns powerfully in. My mind is still reeling as I write this review. I cannot stop thinking about all the events that transpired in this novel and their crazy implications for the rest of the series. Only a special fantasy series can make me feel this effect right after reading the first out of the planned 3 or 4 installments. I predict will be more than a trilogy. But that remains to be seen. I am not comparing which is better here as a storyteller, a pantser or a planner. Both have their merits. However, I believe Islington has showcased the best aspects of being a mostly planner type of storyteller in, with his meticulous story structure and well-placed revelations, And I can already see these factors being implemented magnificently here. This is all splendidly realized without any sacrifice in pacing. The pacing was engrossing from cover to cover for me. The blurb and I have mentioned the enrollment into the prestigious Catanon Academy. I do not think of this as a spoiler. Similar to readers talking about Kavoth entering the university in, or Harry Potter entering Hogwarts. Just a few examples. Both series take place in a magical school setting. The same as, but to set expectations accordingly. Let me be clear that this tale in the Catanon Academy did not start until we reached part 2 of the book. Deus nolens exitus. Get results whether God likes it or not. That's 35% into the book. And by approximation, I think about 50% of the story actually takes place in the Catanon Academy. Part 1 of the story, Imperium sine fine, an empire without an end, was the setup and foundation. This is the introductory section, and it depicts this merciless training montage and preparation under the tutelage of Lannistia before he enters the academy. Additionally, the foundational stage and the training montage were never uneventful. Islington efficaciously made the 3 parts of the narrative here have their own overarching story arc, beginning, middle section, and concluding chapters, while being seamlessly connected to one another. If you already have a great time reading part 1, you will be gripped with the rest of the book. This, of course, comes with a caveat that the magical school or academy trope and setting is one of your favorites. Is a book about ambition, justice, greed, vengeance, friendship, leadership, loyalty, knowledge, and family. And although these were on some level established since part 1, they were extensively integrated into the narrative in part 2 and part 3. In Cauda Venenum, the poison is in the tail. Once this is in the Catanon Academy, an academy that rewards greed and victory above all else. A magic school setting in fantasy is constantly irresistible to me. I have no idea when I will be over this trope, but it is not anytime soon. I am confident in that. I cannot help it, okay? Whether in novels, manga, or video games, I have many of my favorite adult fantasy stories centers or starts in a magical or battle school setting. It is one of my favorite tropes of all time. There is something about training montages, learning new abilities and skills, overcoming challenges, and defeating bullies or horrible teachers while forming friendships that always feel satisfying and relatable. These factors in fantasy novels, paired with the magical school trope, and a main character that earned my investment, have a good chance of becoming one of my favorite books. They are some of my favorite escapism, assuming they are done right, of course, and is a good example where all of these were infused incredibly well. A few comments have stated they did not feel connected to the main characters of due to its heavily plot-focused storyline, except for Caden, although I do not fully agree with this notion, because I like Davian, Asha, and many characters in the trilogy enough. I certainly agree Caden is the best character in. Caden is one of my favorite characters in the fantasy genre. It is with a heart full of happiness I say it is very likely this will become a character I love as much as Caden in the future. Try not to misinterpret what I said as a criticism toward is one of my favorite trilogies. My point is that Islington has developed further as a storyteller, with more books in the series available in the future. The potential for series to be better than is strongly evident. If I am already this compelled and invested in this and his story just from reading, what would be the outcome after reading the sequels? I am excited to find out. I found this to be a character reminiscent of Kavoth or Darrow, forged by his brutal past. The rigorous physical and mental training he partakes from a young age has acted as an eternal fire of motivation that transformed him into a skillful fighter, intelligent, resourceful, a quick learner, and a jack of all trades. In other words, Vis is great at many things. However, he is not flawless. Vis lies a lot for survival and is often blinded by rage. This uncontrollable crimson veil of wrath often leads him toward conflicts or iconic moments. Depending on how you look at the situation, his capacity for violence and fury is a weakness he needs to tame. And he soon realizes he cannot do everything by himself. This is why the unlikely friendship he forms in the academy, especially with Calidus and Aiden, gives him solace and hope amidst all the loneliness, dangers, and life-threatening allegiances he's juggling. Moments of virtue, loyalty, and solidarity were relatively rare and hard-earned, but the warmth of each one of these occurrences felt palpable. They radiated from the pages. All of these, along with Vis' inspiring courage, determination, and compassion, reinforce the unputdownable narrative for me. Islington's improved prose was responsible for my immersion and connection with the novel. Islington successfully nailed Vis' personality and voice so damn well. In science fiction and fantasy novels, it is frequently crucial for me to truly feel like the POV character is telling their story, not the author. The narrative has to completely enthrall me in the POV character's narration and inner thoughts. The best kind of SFF authors can do this. Here are some examples of an SFF series with excellent first-person POV narration. Fits In, by Robin Hobb. Kavoth In, by Patrick Rothfuss. Darrow In, by Pierce Brown. And Tomas Piety In, by Peter McLean with Tomas Piety. These four characters' narration felt like the author became the messenger with a mission to write and deliver their tales. And that, precisely, is what has been accomplished in Islington's writing style has the ability to conjure vivid imagery in my mind and an engaging reading experience effectively. And these praises are not exclusive to Vis. The entire story is told from the first-person POV narration, in present tense, of Vis. And yet, I still feel like I got to know the supporting characters' motivations and personalities almost as well as Vis. They are all unique with their own qualities. Finally, before I close this long enough review, I want to elaborate on the world building of the series. When I read, it hit me that I haven't read as much Roman-inspired epic fantasy series as I thought. I think this is a factor that increased my reading enjoyment. There is, by Jim Butcher, a popular Roman-inspired fantasy series, but, in my opinion, is multiple times superior. The world building feels relatively fresh. Many aspects of the world building in are deeply rooted in its Roman inspiration. The names, clothing, beautiful vistas, settings, in-world game, and more. Every aspect of the Roman-inspired world and Islington's crafted fantasy lore were delivered in detail gradually. I did not feel overwhelmed by the terminologies. There is a character list and glossary at the back of the book every time I need to remind myself of something. And it did not take long for me to feel immersed in this Roman-inspired epic fantasy series. And I loved it. The gladiatorial bouts, the Naumachia, the Catanon rankings, and how the magic system will, which I'm sure we will see even more of its usage in future sequels, is interweaved into the story. Everything felt so natural to the plotlines. Plus, there is, of course, Islington's own creation in the manifestation of the mystery of the ancient weaponry and cataclysm. A world-spanning disaster 3 centuries ago that left less than 5 people in every 100 alive. Maybe it is more accurate to call, and the series, an epic science fantasy series due to how the high fantasy aspect and scientific technologies merged and enhanced the narrative. And I, as a fan of having more sci-fi elements in epic fantasy, I'm totally pleased by all of these combinations. The characters' development, in-depth lore, technologies, and history established in, have provided possibilities for the will and mysteries of the cataclysm and more to be explored further in the next installments. This is also a darker novel than I expected. Explosions, massacres, shredded flesh and blood, and obsidian eyes and blades. The action scenes, the big action sequences, labyrinth runs, or duels, were all tension-packed. Islington displayed the immense terror every second can bring in the lurking presence of disintegration and chaos. Violence begets grief, and grief begets violence. Is it a mistake, or is it righteous, to repay the sorrow caused by the heinous sins of the past with more violence of the present? Closed the magical battle school, dark academia portion of the series. And that alone was already super satisfying. But oh my god, the mysteries and implications raised after the final chapters were groundbreaking, to say the least without spoilers. What Islington did in the epilogue, ex uno plures, out of one, many, was nothing short of outstanding. In one chapter, Islington escalated the scintillating novel into something even more extraordinary. My emotional attachment to the characters and events of this book is undeniable. By James Islington is a phenomenal achievement. Islington has flourishingly crafted a Roman-inspired science fantasy world with brilliant plotlines that feel believable through the perspective of a talented and flawed main character imbued with a superbly distinct voice. I absolutely loved it. It is one of the best books I've ever read. And it is also one of the rare books where, upon finishing it, I immediately wanted to reread from the beginning. And I know I will do that when the sequel is near. The waiting time for the sequel will be one of the worst waiting times I need to endure. How could it not be after the intense and insane culmination of the book? But until then, I will be patient. Audi, hear, read, see, taste, be silent, and read, as soon as possible. A new exceptional science fantasy series destined to become a classic is here. Has everything I love in an epic science fantasy novel. And many scenes here will become eternal moments in my mind.
What did readers really think about The Last Tale of the Flower Bride? Jessica's comment, liked by over 523 people, might give us a clue. I think I liked this. I don't know. It's really weird, but the writing is quite lovely. I mean, there's no doubt that RC can weave a tale, and this one feels quite experimental compared to her previous books. I'm not sure I fully understand everything I read, but in walking away feel satisfied? Kinda hard to pinpoint how I'm feeling about this one specifically, but I'm interested in seeing what kinds of other adult novels RC will write. I think if you're up for something odd, yet pretty, then this is a book you might want to try.
We now turn to the book that wouldn't burn. Jessica, whose comment garnered 562 likes, shared the following opinion. I've been meaning to pick up her ML book for so long, but I could never choose which series to start with first. But when I saw the cover for this and read the synopsis, I immediately knew this was the book I had been waiting for the entire time. And how thrilled I am that this was my first experience with ML's storytelling. Because this is a book that causes the reader to question things, to challenge beliefs, and to seek new perspectives. It's an ode to stories and how they inspire dreams, create forms of escape, and teach new things. It's a tale that defines the SFF genre, while also providing current-day introspection. So if you love the library, the protectors of stories, and the power of books, this is one you should be looking forward to.
What did readers really think about Ink Blood Sister Scribe? Megan and #X1F98B, hiatus on and off's comment, liked by over 340 people, might give us a clue. I feel a little conflicted with this one. It was interesting, but it never pulled me in. It started to pick up at the 70% mark, and it's a 624 pages book. And by that time, I find I didn't really care about any of the characters except Colin's smiling face with tear. I felt so sleepy while reading this and had to force myself to pick it back up. Cold sweat smile. I think this book is for you if you want to read about protecting magical books from malevolent hands. It's a slow story in my opinion, so if you like to savor your books rather than devour them, this will definitely be for you. Pre-read, Took a little reading break yesterday. Hope this delivers heart with ribbon.
Next up is Swordcatcher. Here's what SK had to say. Her comment got 528 likes, so that didn't work in my favor at all. This was my first book by Cassandra Clare and it was a HUGEEE disappointment. Comment 28 likes. 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 Mon 28 likes. Comment 28 likes. Comment 28 likes. Comment 28 likes. Kept making me zone out. IDK, what the author was trying to achieve with such useless information at times. From the world building to the color of a wall, everything is being dumped. Trust me, this book needs like 2 more edits. I was skimming in the second half. Palisade. Palisade woes arc. 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 There was such immense lack of clarity. Like sure, did the author make up a lot of words for places and people both? Yes, but then she failed to expand on them. Free. Cribby Schumark. Tribby Schumark. Tribby Schumark. Cribby Schumark. Free. Cribby Schumark. Cribby Schumark. I could not understand them at all. Their motives were pretty clear in the beginning, but it soon tried to develop into something more and eventually got all messed up. 4. The way it's being marketed, one would think there is enough romance in it, but N0005. It's clear that this book is setting up for something big, but at the same time, something needs to happen in this one too. WTF. How do you expect me to continue this series when it's just about characters going to random places for nothing? Overall, an extremely poorly written book. It could have been 270 to 300 pages shorter if it had been edited. I don't think I'll be checking out any of her other books anytime soon. Good riddance. I'm glad this monstrosity is over. Tilde 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 tilde. My first Cassandra Clare book. Please be good, crossed fingers.
What did readers really think about Starling House? Emma Skeeze's comment, liked by over 1362 people, might give us a clue. Starling House is a book of almosts. I liked it. These were interesting characters. It had a good plot resolution. It has something to say about race and class. It's full of great concepts that are executed well. But none of it ever hits the mark. I nothing this book. I don't like it. I don't know that I care enough to really dislike it. This was such a bizarre reading experience because all the individual pieces are great. In explaining the book to a friend as I was reading, I was aware that everything I was saying sounded really interesting, because in theory it all should be. So why was I just bored reading it? All those really cool pieces never quite came together into anything cohesive. They resolved into a book, but the pieces were shoved into the puzzle at odd angles wherever they might fit, and in the end the picture they made was just off. Don't mind my bad metaphor, it might be a symptom of me just having read this book. This book feels way too slow and entirely too long, which is a wild critique to have about something that's barely 300 pages. I don't know, I just think nothing worked. Nothing was as fleshed out as it should have been, the characters weren't very deep, the fantasy aspects were never explained well enough, the climax was anticlimactic, even the prose felt appropriately moody and atmospheric only sometimes. The whole book was just, meh. It was too long for what it did and too short for what I think it was trying to do. I guess what I'm saying is that this book is the definition of mid. The house is the best character in the whole book.
Here comes the Adventures of Amina al-Sirafi, and guess what? Hannah Azarang's hot take scored 748 likes. Let's read it. The first half of this book was fantastic. I couldn't put it down. I was utterly engrossed in the story. But the second half took a bit of a silly turn. Almost surrealist in some ways that, for the original tone of the book, felt a little too over the top.
Now let's move on to the Unmaking of June Farrow. Let's see what Niloufar Ozmekik, whose comment received 1070 likes, had to say. I haven't experienced the greatest joy and brilliance of what the heck I just read, kind of twisty brain cell burner fantasy, sci-fi novel. Giving me the same feelings of binge watching the craziest Black Mirror episodes in Chris Nolan's complexly written movies at the same time. Unmaking of June Farrow is on another level of amazingness. It's complex, unique, tempting, unpredictable, surprising, jaw-dropping, and exhausting to your brain cells, dragging you into an unusual story of the Farrow women and their complex family history. It's as intricate as Netflix's German original series Dark. To understand the entire connection between each Farrow woman's timeline could give you real headaches and make you question who's related to whom during the brainstorming confusion. Twists and shocking revelations make you scream aloud. I mostly consider myself a good twist catcher who can see most of them coming from miles away with my spider senses. But this morning there are so many of them that are unexpected. And especially one of them made me jump from my seat as I covered my mouth not to scream louder. Oh boy, that was the biggest sucker punch on my face. And I can honestly say for a million times I couldn't ever see it coming, even if that twist was screaming at my face. I'm here. Why don't you see me? Single quote. It has a mind-bending time travel story that keeps you guessing how the entire execution will unfold, cooking up conspiracy theories about the murder mystery. But it also includes a heartbreaking, intense love story, even though we've been introduced to the heartbroken hero a little later. It is also one of the most powerful feminist stories about the collaboration of women who help each other to survive and the sacrifices the mothers make to protect their children. The story revolves around the last Farrow woman, June Farrow, living in Jasper, NC as the last surviving woman of their family at the age of 34, grieving her grandmother who raised her with her best friend Bertie after her mother, Susanna, who has been suffering from mental illness, which is fated to curse the entire women in the family, disappeared out of nowhere, presumed dead. June also starts showing signs of madness, just like the other Farrow women had before they became completely insane. She starts seeing things that don't exist, including a mystery man smoking a cigarette watching her at several places. And a red door appears out of nowhere, awaiting her to turn its knob. She also hears a man's voice when she wakes up from a long sleep, feeling like somebody's hands are on her body, as she thinks everything she sees are signs of her deteriorating mental health condition. She finds an envelope sent by her grandmother before she died. There's a photograph of two people in the envelope. One of them is the town's esteemed minister who was killed by a mysterious killer who was never caught. And there is also a woman in the photo who looks exactly like her long-lost mother, which is impossible because the photo was taken 1 century ago. However, when she digs through and talks with her grandmother's best friend Bertie, she realizes that nothing is as it seems and she may not be going insane because the things she's experienced might be real. When she decides to pass through the red door that keeps appearing and calling her to open it, she finds herself in a place where she can change the entire direction of the frayed timeline. Between the future and the past, could she save the Farrow women from the curse at the risk of putting her own fate at risk forever? Could she change things in her life by rethinking her decision not to fall in love and have her own family? The journey she embarks on is a thrilling roller coaster ride that will challenge her every belief and force her to confront the deepest parts of herself. The novel seamlessly weaves together elements of fantasy, science fiction, mystery, and romance, creating a tapestry of emotions that will leave readers captivated until the very last page. With each revelation and twist, the story becomes more enthralling, leaving readers gasping in surprise and marveling at the author's ingenuity. Adrienne Young has crafted a masterpiece that blurs the lines between reality and fiction, immersing readers in a world where the impossible becomes possible. Furthermore, Unmaking of June Farrow delves into profound themes of identity, family, love, and sacrifice. It explores the strength of women and their ability to endure and conquer even the most daunting challenges. The interconnectedness of the Farrow women's lives creates a web of intrigue and fascination that keeps readers guessing until the very end. This book will undoubtedly linger in the minds of its readers long after they've turned the final page. It will set a new standard for fantasy and sci-fi novels, leaving an indelible mark on the genre. Adrienne Young's mastery of storytelling is evident throughout the novel, making it a must-read for anyone who craves a wholly immersive and emotionally charged reading experience. Overall, this book will surprise you. It will ruin you for other books because you'll start comparing them to this fantastic sci-fi novel. And for a long time, it will be harder to find a book as well written as this one. Just order your copy. This is one of the most outstanding works I've read lately and definitely the best book by Adrienne Young. Many thanks to NetGalley and Random House Publishing, Valentine, Delacourt Press for sharing this Amazing Books digital reviewer copy with me in exchange for my honest thoughts. Follow me on medium.com to read my articles about books, movies, streaming series, astrology.
Stone Blind stirred some reactions. Jessica's comment, which got 865 likes, might just explain why. This book has an image of Medusa on the cover. The story is subtitled, Medusa's Story. So should NT the main character, focus of the book be, I don't know, Medusa? Lol. I'm so genuinely disappointed that Medusa only really appears in about 30% of this novel, if you were add all of her appearances together. The predominant focus of the novel is on the gods, their petty squabbles, and their revenge schemes against each other. Because of this, Medusa is reduced to just a minor player in the gods' lives, rather than her being the story itself. So I'm a little bitter about that. However, this actually is a really good story. I enjoyed reading about the gods one-upping each other, how they use mortals to achieve their goals, and everything in between. I found them to be very entertaining and enjoyed how their characters are written. The overall narrative is also quite nice. I just wish either one, this had more Medusa, or two, this hadn't been pitched, advertised as a Medusa story. //
Our next book is A Emily Books with Emily Fox on YouTube, whose comment was liked by 690 readers, had this to say: sad face 4.25. I'm a big fan of Schwab at this point, so I was very excited for more adventures in this world. The magic system and the world building are the strength and characters. I really liked Tess and her magic. She can see the threads of power, but I still can't stand. Enough action with people wanting to overthrow the crown, and I'm curious of what will happen with the other Londons.
Now let's move on to bookshops and bone dust. Let's see what Emily, Books with Emily Fox on YouTube, whose comment received 712 likes, had to say: sad face 4.25. I never thought I would be into cozy fantasy, but the first book pleasantly surprised me, so I was very excited for the prequel. Younger Viv is left behind in a small town to recover from an injury, makes some friends, a little bit of romance, a little bit of action, and there's a bookshop. I could have read 100 more pages of cozy bookshop TBH. If you enjoyed the first one, you'll enjoy this one.
We now turn to A Day of Fallen Night. Margaret M., having a challenging time and on GR as much as I can, whose comment garnered 376 likes, shared the following opinion. And it's finally here. The prequel to The Priory of the Orange Tree. Rich in content, with real depth to the human emotion on display and personal passion portrayed through the characters. Wonderful for the tension and mistrust created through the political intrigue, and daring in its ambition and depiction of such a vast expanse of worlds. Overall, an impressive story of three powerful women whose lives become entwined, as Shannon breathes fire and life into this incredible story of survival, love, and honor. A desirable and engrossing fantasy that is intense, dangerous, fascinating but compelling, and also extraordinary. There is too much in this book to write a credible summary of the story and its plots, so here are a few snippets of what to expect. The
The Priory's existence is threatened, the dragons that have been asleep for a long time are awakening, Sabran the Ambitious has married the new king of Harrow. In the hope to save both realms from ruin, Dimaline must awaken the gods and protect herself from the person intent on destroying her, and when Dreadmount erupts, these three women must be prepared and capable of protecting their people from its devastating threat of extinction. A battle of minds, queens of strategy, and a conclusion that must be decisive and fitting. Love, pregnancy, greed, ambition, betrayal, survival, war, dragons, magic, grief, chaos and adventure is what you get from A Day of Fallen Night. The intricate world building, mainly from the east to west, was so impressive. This was such an ambitious tale that expanded the story into spherical regions, with their own traditions, political landscape, religions and practices, myths as well as cultures. The three main female characters were all equally adorable, admirable, and deserving of a central role. All very different, but it was how their lives became entwined, was the main appeal for this book, even though their story, independent of each other, was unique, eventful, but also powerful. The sheer effort and commitment in writing such a comprehensive book is to be commended, but it does not stop there, because Shannon also provides the images of the global landscape, an explanation of the characters and their roles, and even a glossary of terms to help the reader. There is a love story for everyone, and as a strong feminist story, this would appeal to all women. Her love story. Whilst I fell in love with many of these characters, there was just too many to fully appreciate them all, and quite a few added little to the overall story. Her love story. It was just too long and at times overly complex. I say that, but then I am obsessed with the extent and scale of the storytelling, although I would suggest that it doesn't take 850 pages to achieve that. I would have preferred more moments of drama and surprise in the middle of the book, to lift things a little, because it felt everything was being saved to the end and the conclusion of this series. In such a long book, we needed more dramatic moments in the middle, I feel. Kill off a few of those key characters, for example, explode their world, or introduce a scenario of checkmate. In all epic, a multicultured and multi-layered story that was so captivating, immersive and dramatic. A world that was so intricately depicted but vast in its scope. A kaleidoscope of colors, traditions and characters. A series of plots to enthrall and captivate, and written in a dreamlike way that was also compelling and believable. What more could a person want, except less pages and more action in the middle? A wonderful fantasy. And a quote that resonates with me.
Now let's move on to Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies. Let's see what Emma Skis, whose comment received 949 likes, had to say. I was really close to DNFing this about halfway through, and I honestly should have. This was pretty boring and very overwritten. Imagine 300 pages of that. It gets old. The plot moves at a glacial pace for a book that's only 300 pages long, and I didn't care enough about the main characters for them to carry me along. Although shout out to the best character in the book by far, I also found the male main character to be completely insufferable. He's selfish, self-centered and lazy, where the female main character is driven and ambitious. This is all intentional in his character, and I get that, I just didn't care for it. He shows some level of initiative toward the climax of the book, but never enough for me to actually care about him or believe that he's capable of fully caring about anyone else. He pokes fun at the FMC for traits which I read as marking her as clearly autistic coded, largely in not understanding the common social cues and rituals of those around her. And especially early in the book, it gave me the distinct impression of laughing Rit Sabansaher, rather than Trok Kwat Tanta. Curious if anyone else had a similar feeling. Edit. I've spoken with someone else who DNF'd the book for this exact reason, so I'm glad to see I'm not alone in this. So it was boring, dry, overwritten, and I didn't like the characters. I gave it at a low 3 rating right now because I'm not sure it's low enough to warrant something in the 2 range. But I did not have a very good time with this, and I'm glad it's over. Bummer.
Tress of the Emerald Sea stirred some reactions. Petrick's comment, which got 913 likes, might just explain why. The time is here. The first of the 4 awaited secret project novels by Brandon Sanderson is here. If you're active in the fantasy community, or even if you're not, it is no longer news that Sanderson has shocked the world with the immense success of his 4 secret novels Kickstarter campaign. #1 most pledged Kickstarter campaign of all time. It doesn't get more successful than that. And it shouldn't also come as a shock that I, as a longtime fan of his Cosmere novels, end up enjoying. I wanted to start my year with a great book, and choosing this book as the first novel of 2023, as I said, was the right pick. Sanderson plus a full-length Cosmere novel is a formula that never ceases to impress me. What I did not expect, however, was just how visually beautiful would be. I am pleasantly surprised. I am glad the past Petrick decided to buy 4 premium hardcover editions of the secret novels. And I am eternally thankful to my co-blogger, T.S., for covering the expense of the shipping fee. Without T.S., I do not think I would cave into buying the premium hardcover editions. And I would regret it so much. I will go into more details on this later. But at $40 per secret novel, not counting the shipping fee, and for everything we get, this special edition can be considered, relatively, a bargain. This is on top of it being such a fun and cozy book to read. All her life on an island named the Rock in the emerald green ocean, Tress lived a simple life with the simple pleasures of collecting cups received from sailors from faraway lands and listening to stories told by her friend, Charlie. But when Charlie's father takes him on a voyage to find a bride and disaster strikes, Tress must leave her simple life to stow away on a ship and seek the sorceress of the deadly Midnight Sea. Although I expected to love this book, I was initially worried after reading the first few chapters. Note the word ship in the official premise. Sailing and seafaring dominated the majority of. Personally, I tend to have mixed feelings about fantasy books with a heavy focus on seafaring unless they're by Robin Hobb and trilogy by R.J. Barker. And there were indeed some sections here where I felt a bit of a lull because of this. However, my overall experience was fun. Most of the time, it was difficult for me to stay away from the book. Sanderson's prose and the relatively short length of the novel, plus its short chapters, made it easy for me to read 1 or 2 chapters whenever I had some free time. This was a delightful book about human beings, contradictions, leadership, found family, stories, love, bravery, and empathy. Before reading, I did not read any of the secret novel preview chapters. However, based on the known artists and the title or premise of the 4 novels, ranked 3rd out of 4. I am interested in all 4, but I am most excited about the 3rd and 4th secret novels. Based on these, the first 2 secret novels felt like they would be the most tonally different from Sanderson's other Cosmere books. Having read all published Cosmere stories, including this one, I can convey that, has proved it. Sanderson has mentioned that, is one of the main inspirations behind this book. Another good comparison for what kind of tone you're getting here is by Terry Pratchett and Neil Gaiman. So it is time to admit something. I haven't read or watched yet, but I have watched, and I think Sanderson nailed the comparison he's going for. The storytelling is whimsical and light-hearted in tone but also imbued with clever philosophical nuggets and serious themes occasionally. I loved the novel for it. I don't think I would have liked it this much if it was just all fun and joy all the way through. Sanderson's comedy, especially when the narrative involves young adult characters, doesn't land well with me often. But his hard-hitting and thought-provoking passages? That's another story. Sanderson may not have flowery prose, but the words he put on the pages of his novel frequently hit and became passages I think about daily. A few examples from this book are, and also these 2 long passages about memories. Although possible, it wouldn't feel organic to have these kinds of passages appearing throughout the book if the novel is told through the first-person or third-person perspective of Tress. These were effective because the entire story is narrated through Hoyd's perspective. Hoyd is an integral character in Sanderson's Cosmere universe, and we, Cosmere fans, are all waiting for Hoyd's origin story. Sanderson mentioned he wanted to practice and be more fluent at writing Hoyd's perspective before that backstory novel happened, and this is the book where it came to fruition. This won't, however, be how the story is told eventually in Hoyd's backstory novel. It will definitely be less whimsical, but to give you an idea of the kind of voice Sanderson is giving Hoyd in this book. If you've read series, this is more in tune with the unforgettable Wandersail and The Dog and the Dragon stories Hoyd told in the series, a full-length version of that kind of in-world story. I absolutely loved Wandersail and The Dog and the Dragon, and obviously, I ended up loving as well. So yes, we get to learn more about Hoyd and the Cosmere. More on this in the next paragraph inside this book. But at the end of the day, even though this is told through Hoyd's perspective, is still a standalone story about Tress and her adventures I mentioned earlier, and I am no stranger to voicing how much I love the Bridge 4 group in the series. The found family trope is one of the many things Sanderson executed extremely well in the first trilogy, and he managed to craft another cherishable found family in this book. Tress, Huck, Fort, Salleh, and all the characters are well-written and likable characters. The deaf character representation was written with the help of a special sensitivity reader to do it justice, too. And hey, for the first time in the Cosmere, we finally get to see a real dragon, as Tress and the crew of the ship she's in face danger constantly. The bonds between them grow deeper and deeper. My investment in them, too, and upon reaching the last page, I can't help but hope we will get more stories or appearances from these characters eventually. Knowing how connected with each other the Cosmere is now, I'm confident we will. Speaking of Cosmere connections, and because people will ask me this question, should you read other Cosmere books first? Is a standalone story in the world of Lumar. This marks the first time we get a book taking place in this world in the Cosmere. Like always, it is not necessary to read the other Cosmere books first to enjoy the main story here. But will you benefit from reading them? Yes, you will. I talk about this already in my review of, but moving forward, Sanderson's future publications in the Cosmere universe, especially the ones taking place after Book 5 of, will most likely have heavy Cosmere crossovers. If you intend to read all of Sanderson's Cosmere books, it is a good idea to start catching up reading them if you want to reap all the connections. As for this book, reading the entirety of so far will be beneficial. Additionally, there were a few small nods to the magic or technology portrayed in, and I will leave it to you to decide whether you want to read them first or not. There is no spoiler for these 3 series. Also, although not the primary planet of the magic and there is no main novel for it yet, ethers and its explosive potential are explored here. One more thing before I end this review. I will update this once I have the physical copy. But right now, even the ebook of the premium edition alone is exquisitely made. Unless the paper quality of the physical copy sucks, which is so doubtful, I can vouch that the $40 I spent on getting this book is well spent. Maybe too well spent. It is almost ridiculous. You won't get a premium, special edition like this with only $40 anywhere else. If Subterranean Press or Grim Oak Press publishes a book like this, I guarantee it will cost at least $200. Not counting the shipping fee and customs fee yet. The stunning design and the more than 10 interior artworks. 4 fully colored art and the rest in green-toned black and white. By Howard Leone enhanced the quality of the aesthetic and the tale. They are magnificent, and I am brimming with excitement waiting for the physical copy to arrive at my place. And if the first secret novel already reaches this level of production value, I want to read and find out what the other 3 will look like. Rest assured, in this review, I leave out some surprises in the clever design and artwork inside this book for you to find out for yourself, whether aesthetically or narrative-wise. Provided a whimsical and wonderful reading experience. It is a refreshing addition to the Cosmere universe. And it is essentially, at least, it read like one, a Cosmere version of an adult fairy tale. With the success of the secret projects, some readers might think Sanderson favors quantity instead of quality in his books recently. It is up to you to think that way, but I can't voice the same sentiment. Personally speaking, doesn't show any drop in storytelling quality. Every book in the Cosmere, including this that he wrote in secret, works amazingly well for me. Similarly to the first, even though this is undoubtedly a different kind of book, I think, is a standalone story that can be enjoyed by both YA or adult fantasy readers, making this even more appealing to a bigger audience. This is a superb first book of 2023 for me, and I hope this signals the positive trajectory of my reading year. I look forward to receiving the physical copy and reading the next secret novel.